Vien, Barney, Jill, and Lance Bass.
Hello.
Well, you know, wow. It's always easier to do nothing, isn't it? Just to sit back and be apathetic and say, I don't know who to vote for, so I'm not going to vote. I don't know what cause is important to me, so I'm not going to do anything. I want to have this be a discussion rather than talking to you. I want you all to talk amongst yourselves. What got you active?
Who wants to start?
Lance.
Okay, go.
Oh, Jill, okay.
So, I mean, as a professor, I am pretty much at the kind of somewhat of the foundation of really trying to inspire and trying to empower kind of that next generation of activists. But I don't know if really activism and activist is probably the right word. Because I think what many of the students that we have, millennials, really look in terms of we want to be able to empower, we want to be able to support, we want to be allies for causes that they really care about. And it's not so much about one individual, but it's about really in terms of building that ecosystem that Van Jones was talking about, but also really listening and understanding, having the empathy, humility to really understand what those causes are about, and empowering others in an entire system to really bring about change. Yeah. So I see that as a professor, as someone that is just witnessing this, how we look in terms of this new generation, their mindset, and really what they want to achieve with their goals and with their career. And they do want to make change happen.
Lance, you looked like you wanted to say.
Yeah, well, I was, early on I learned, I started in the entertainment industry at 16, and I quickly learned that everything that I was saying influenced people. So at a young age, I knew I had to be responsible with what I said. Back then, I was too ignorant to understand that I needed to also be an advocate for causes that I love, and especially this planet. So it took me a few years to realize I was being so selfish with my life and not caring. Oh, I recycled. Oh, I thought I was doing, I was saving the planet. But until I really met, this organization, 15 years ago, that I realized I needed to do something. And I think one of the biggest problems that I find is everyone expects you to be an expert on everything. And there's so many causes that you want to support, but you can't be an expert in everything. So you have to kind of pick and choose the things that you can help move the needle on. And I mean, we can't be experts on, hardly on any subject. So when people try to throw negativity at you, like, well, what about this? What about that? You're not supporting this, human sex trafficking. I'm like, yes, I try to support as much as I can. I try to get the awareness, and I educate myself as much as I can, but I have to do the things that I know that I can help move that needle. And so that's the difficulty that I find just being in a position I am, and being a face that people recognize, because they're always looking for me for answers, and I don't know half the answers, but I do know where to take them, and say, look, Van knows, ask Van.
Yes, that's something that comes to me a lot. What's the point of a rally? What's the point of a march? I said, the point of a rally and a march is like the new town hall. This is where we all meet each other. And if I don't know about sex trafficking, I'm going to meet someone who's working on that issue. We connect, and the next person who asks me who the expert is, I'll be able to say, I know, I got her number right here. And it's building the movement and picking up the pieces of what we don't know and giving them to somebody else, and expanding as
and always reminding people too, because we have no attention span anymore. So that's why we have to have these summits every year. We have to have these award shows every year, just to kind of help people remember what we're trying to do. Right. Next week, people will be on to the next thing.
That's right. Vien, how did you get active?
For me, this was something that I have always felt like was part of my life. It's very personal to me. I'm the youngest of 11 kids. Yes. So I was born into activism, born into organizing. My parents, when they came here, the only jobs they could find were as migrant farm workers, with me strapped to their backs. And they were picking strawberries and snow peas in these pesticide-laden fields. When they graduated from that, they worked in sweatshops, and they were working for 25 cents a shirt, making ends meet with 11 kids. Growing up in Oakland, for me, it was completely normal, the conditions that we were living in. It wasn't until I moved out of Oakland that I began to understand what was really going on, and walking out the doors, how urgent it feels now and continues to feel for me to do this work. So I want to paint you guys a picture of what it feels like to live in my community. I live in this place called Fruitvale, and we have dry cleaners 4 blocks away from my house. It turns out a few years ago, they've been storing these huge vats of chemicals, and it had been leaking. And we're still trying to figure out how much of the chemicals have been seeped into the fruits and the vegetables and the very soil of a community called Fruitvale, named that because we depend on the fruits we grow in order to eat, in order to feed our family. In order for us to get to downtown Oakland to work, it takes an hour on the bus. But if you miss that bus, which often happens when it gets crowded, then you have to wait for the next one, and oftentimes people lose their jobs because they're late. To get onto the public transportation system, it takes 3 times as much money, and you have to walk a mile just to get to the system itself, which for our community is very hard for moms to get to. And so we're living in a community that is also surrounded on all sides by highways and freeways. In fact, because of the levels of toxicity in our soil, in our air, and in our community, the East Bay Tribune, East Bay Express, which now is picked up by Tribune, was documenting that the life expectancy in our community is 12 years less than one living 7 miles away.
Wow.
Imagine losing all those years from kindergarten to graduating high school. That's what it means for me and my kids that are living in this community. On top of all of that, we go across the country now trying to pass laws that actually makes the communities better. I went to Flint because of the levels of toxicity that was in their blood system, their lead in their bloods. In 2016, news broke nationally that the blood level of lead in our kids in our zip code was higher than Flint, Michigan, because of the housing stock that was so old. So for me, when I walk out the door, when I breathe the air, when I drink the water, when I think about washing fruits and vegetables for my kids, I think about the urgency of today and how our community is not just our community. Many people across this country live this life. And how do we actually do more faster? Because we need it.
Thank you so much. Barney, talk to us.
Well, I think for me, it started off at an early age. I was raised in off-grid Australia, so not having power and basic amenities really fostered a respect that we shouldn't take anything for granted in our planet and in our lifestyle, in every aspect of what we do on a day-to-day basis. But I think that responsibility to really create action every day actually really grew out of feeling like a hypocrite, whether that be walking to the South Pole powered off renewable energy, which sounds great. We had NASA design ice melters, biofuel made from waste, lithium batteries, but still, even to do that expedition, we had to get down there, use planes, use fuel, be a part of a huge system to make that expedition happen. When I go to Yosemite to climb a mountain, great, it's awesome. I have a connection to the outdoors. I'm climbing a mountain, but still, there's a back cost to getting me to that experience. Going to Bali and posting photos of Instagram and doing handstands on a beach, awesome, it's great. I don't disencourage that, but through all of those assets of me personally being connected to the outdoors, like the more I traveled, the more I adventured, the more I did those things, there was just this growing guilt and stagnation within myself and a hypocrisy. Like, how can I love a place and have a connection to a place and yet not be giving back to it directly, like with tangible metrics, tangible impact? And for me, that started me on the journey to create this campaign, the Climate Force Challenge, which I'm managing over this next, leading into 2025, to be a part of reducing 326 million tons of CO2 through big and small solutions. And I think every day when I wake up, it's that weight and that hypocrisy that my lifestyle, the average American uses 20 tons of CO2 yearly, I'm probably on 100, even probably more. Most of us in this room hopping on planes, hopping in Ubers, living out of hotel rooms for the most part. We live a very carbon-intensive life. We live a very consumer-intensive life, and I just have that responsibility within myself to give back as much as I can, because right now I feel like I'm taking more than giving back, and that's where that responsibility and that hopefully I can get rid of that itch in my stomach, and when I'm 60 or 70 or 80, I can be proud that I've created a legacy that's tangible. I think so much of what we do in the environmental space, whether that be carbon or renewable tech or how we eat or managing our waste or inspiring people through media, we need to get people touching things more and really understanding that you plant a tree, it lasts 40 years, that you clean up a ton of carbon, you manage your waste in this way, you invest in technology that's filtering CO2 directly out of the air. That's tangible stuff, and I think it's that action, intangibility will hopefully one day make that itch go away. But that itch is what drove me to be sitting here with such a fine group of people, for sure.
What you touched on, and you too, Lance, is one thing moves you, but then you see how connected it is to something else, and you find out that there's a whole grid where everything is really connected. How do you choose then? Because you're talking about so many different issues. How do you choose what to focus on well, or is it okay to spread yourself out?
I think it's important to develop a niche and to be focused within your niche, but my niche is carbon at the moment and cleaning up carbon. So whether that be planting 10 million trees or convincing people that having a couple of meatless days during your week, whether it be a small solution like that or planting 10 million trees or investing, $100 million into technology that's directly cleaning CO2 out of the air in Iceland and Switzerland. I mean, they're both very different, but they still source towards that centralized theme of carbon and carbon responsibility. Right. So that's my focus, but so many different things come into that, whether that be equality, empowering women to be stewards within their family, and they're the ones who decide what they eat on a day-to-day basis. So I think there's a lot of assets that come into it, but I think it's important to have a centralized metric and a centralized target. Personally, I feel like since I've had that 326 million ton metric, it's given me more focused, and it allows me to centralize what I'm doing and how other people can be a part of that. I think if you don't have that goal and that target and that metric to some extent, I think some people fall short of that, because people are like, where's your impact? What have you actually done? Where's that tangibility of what you're doing? So I think, I hope that answers your question.
Is Ed Begley still here, or? No, he had to leave. He had to leave, okay. Yeah. We were at his house the other day. This guru from India was planting 1 million trees. So when you said 1 million trees, because the whole thing about the riverbanks now are just crumbling away and losing everything. So to plant the trees holds the water in the soil so it doesn't erode and there aren't big mudslides when it rains. And this is happening, and you're doing the same thing. Tell me more of what you're up to, Jill.
Yeah, I mean, you raised an excellent point in terms of understanding or knowing what you are really passionate about. And when we talk a lot about I teach social entrepreneurship, and we have a lot of students who come into the program. They have a variety of different social sectors that they're interested in. And a lot of times they can be really passionate about a number of things: healthcare reform, discrimination, civil rights, just a whole host of a plethora of issues. And we try a lot of times what we call kind of zooming in, then zooming out. And part of zooming in is find something that they are passionate about, something that is relevant to them, that has some salience to what they believe in and what their passion is all about. And do a really good job in terms of having a metric or a metrics that you would stand by. And having in terms of, before you zoom out and you go into other issues and you look into in terms of what are some other areas that could be affected by the change that we want to make, is to really then are we having a positive, or are we having sometimes a negative impact? And I think we have to be really careful about that we're not having a negative impact because we're pressing our own ideals and our own values on communities that we believe, this idea or this innovation will work. And sometimes that's not the case, because when we get out of the building and really get into the communities and really understand what their values are, it's very, very different. So having that really kind of that central kind of guide of how do we look at impact, and are we really being effective, and are we doing the right thing in terms of some of the innovations and ideas that we're trying to do as social entrepreneurs in our program.
And how, it's so difficult too to educate people on these issues. Everyone is so different. So the way that you preach to people has to be completely different. You can kill them with kindness with this person, it changes their mind. This one you have to find something that relates to them. So that's the difficult part, is everyone thinks differently. So you have to navigate that.
That is so important for you to say, because that's something that we struggle with a lot now. I was a lawyer by training, and we did a lot of work around policy, and was speaking in legalese and wonk, which is its own special language. And through that work, I got a lot of policies passed and all of that stuff. But when Trump got elected, what I realized, what we did not do well is communicate to this country a vision, a thing that they can grasp onto, that people can see themselves as part of. And I think because we failed to do that, we haven't had people who understood the climate work, who understood why a carbon neutral future is free, who doesn't understand why we want clean transportation, because they don't see themselves in that vision, right? And so the work we do now is how do we actually incorporate more voices, diversify the audience. And Francis, you've been amazing at helping to communicate this to people who are across the country, whether you're red or white, whether you're in rural communities or urban. We got to get people connected to this work and to see that this is not just about Flint, but this could also be about coal country. This could also be about hopefulness. And just to wrap that point up, one of the things that we are doing is to bring in moms across the country. So we work with Salt Lake City Republican moms, Florida moms, Texans. We worked with kids and treat them as climate heroes so they can see themselves in capes. They run around and they can paint pictures of the future. But for us, the struggle has been, how do we communicate to people to be heard and away from this partisan fight, right? To really communicate to be heard.
And I think to add on that, it's important that, especially within a group like this, that we don't isolate everyday people. Like Van Joes I really liked his putting us in the shoes of that guy who lost his job and running us through that whole process. Like, we can't isolate those sort of everyday people from the ecosystem that we're a part of. Like, people need to realize that they have just as much as responsibility, power, and opportunity to save and make money, and to hopefully, affect their status, and to feel proud to be a part of impacting their community in a small way. Whether that be doing 10 checklists in your home and in your small business, or that be a hedge fund manager deciding to plant 1 billion trees. Like, both ends of those spectrums, like, people need to feel just as inspired to be a part of that, because I feel like people in this bucket, of the everyday bucket, feel like, oh, it's the Paris Agreement who we're going to take. It's the federal's going to take care of it, our governments, our mayors. But we need to be making people feel really hopeful. Like, I love that you would use the word hopeful, that there is an opportunity about this, and the inconvenient solutions are inconvenient truth is a reality, but we need to be giving people those convenient solutions on a big scale and a small scale to show that they can make a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's the labels are man-made, right? Partisan, it shouldn't even be part of the discussion. There's one race, the human race, and there are no borders. Animals cross everywhere. Turtle Island here, where we are, had no lines of demarcation. It was something that, white guys came up with, to like parcel off the land and own it. Nothing can be owned on this planet. We have to take care of our Mother Earth. What else do you want to talk about? I've got. What is that time doing? I was told. Do we have 17 more minutes left?
We're at double the time.
Because it was at 12 a minute ago. Are we gaining time?
We're going back in time.
One thing I did want to talk about is, with this social activism and these young, generation, what I've learned, and I think what this younger generation really is aware of, is how we vote with our dollar now. Yeah. And thank goodness for social media that we can organize a lot, stronger. I mean, look at Laura Ingraham, for example. Immediately in a day, all our sponsors went away because so many, especially youth, got together and said, no, we're not going to have this anymore. And within a day, all our sponsors left. So it's amazing that we have these tools to be able to organize so quickly now. And I'm so happy that this young generation gets it, and they're aware, and they're not jaded yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it even goes beyond voting. It goes even beyond just the jobs that they want to create and really where they want to be employed and where they want to make the difference. The best talent sometimes out of many of the schools are going to organizations that care about the environment. They care about social issues. They have CEOs that are out there and they want to talk about these things. They're not just, hiding it underneath the rug. They really are. They make it part of their culture. And that is such an incentive for the younger generation and really what they're looking for in terms of really tapping into these organizations, changing the organizations and changing really the overall kind of ecosystem of what we're doing as business and as individuals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think one of your questions that we were talking about before is that how do we convince naysayers or people who don't even want to be a part of this conversation? I think what you just said there is that we need to be finding that middle ground within the conversation about talking about the opportunity and the finance and the economics of this stuff. I mean, we're just teething with innovation and just so much stuff, like that quote from the UN lady. We're in the middle of that 5 years that are going to define the next century and moving forward. And I just feel like we need to be moving away a little bit from the fear and the reality that our icebergs are melting, the sea is, the salinity is changing, it's rising, our forests are disappearing, biodiversity struggling. But within that, we need to be moving a little bit away from the fear and more into the opportunity. And I think if we do that, we can convince those naysayers and the people who just put up this blanket over them, being like, we're doing this our way. This is what's worked for us. This is what's gained money for my family for the last 3 generations. Why should I listen to you? Where's the economics in it? And if you can provide those metrics, provide that opportunity, that's how we get the ball rolling very, very quickly, in my opinion. Because I still see people using the fear too much and need to be moving away from that inconvenient truth to convenient solutions very quickly, or we're just in this static limbo period, and we can't be there for this next 5-10 years, or it's too late.
That's so true. If I can just pick up on that, because the psychiatrist who documented the 7 stages of grief has also said there's only 2 fundamental emotions, love and fear. And as long as you're in the fear, which is despair, depression, anxiety, you can never actually go to the place of love, because it's mutually exclusive. And underneath love and around love is hopefulness and creativity and solutions-oriented kind of thinking. And for us, we try to continue to push towards the feeling of love. We even have a love army. We have a program, it's the Love Army. You guys should all join. And for us, it's about how do we actually demonstrate radical generosity. Our organization is founded by Vien, so it's no coincidence that everything about what we do is about how do we show up for people when it's inconvenient? How do we show up for people out of radical empathy, even when we're not getting credit for it, and even if we don't have money for it, when it's the right thing to do? And one of the things that we did when Flint hit, we said, this is unacceptable. We got to do something about it. We went out there, Mark Ruffalo came out, Van, Tom Steyer, and a few others came out with us and began to say, how do we raise money for people in Flint? We were not funded at all. We did this, and a guy from Flint actually saw what we were doing and heard about what we were trying to do, and he created these T-shirts, and it's completely free. So you guys should grab one from me or Michelle. And the idea is anything that you guys are willing to donate goes straight to Flint and helping them to fix the pipes. But the idea, yes!
This is what I do all the time. I'm sorry, I'm just distracting
You love your activism
No.
t-shirts.
The idea is when you show up for others and you show up with love and just radical generosity, others show up, and that's what gives me hope. That's what gives me hope.
Woo!
And it looks amazing on you.
Fix the pipes.
And to come back to the unfortunately cliched idea of love, and I mean sometimes cliched, not for me and hopefully not for everyone in this room, but I liked what Mr. Jones was saying with love them until the point that they finally love you back, and I think that's an awesome objective. But love them so they can potentially love their planet as well, and also very cliched comment, but if you don't love yourself, why would you be bothered to pick up that plastic and put it in the bin while you're going for a hike? If you don't feel that nourishment within yourself, you're not going to be bothered to care about just throwing the trash over your fence and just who cares? But if you foster that within yourself, your community, your family, I mean it's gonna reflect and flood into how you treat your world, and all the consideration and awareness that you do on like you said, the power of your wallet, or going for a hike, or how you as a customer make your voice heard. I think that's one thing we can really, really rally behind, is just getting customers. Like you said, there's so many young people, especially in social media, and this is a media conference, just get their voice. All they have to do is click one box, and suddenly you've got 20 million people who are following your cause. And if it can affect status and it can affect economics, those are the two biggest driving forces to making change, in my opinion. If you have another 100 warriors like Jaden Smith, Kim Kardashian, Brad Pitt, all of these people start becoming net positive, counting their carbon, recycling, having vegan meals every third day, you'd have a cultural revolution in a year. And if people aren't interested in that status, it either needs to make money or save money for them. And if we can push that through media, and just 100 people who ask Toyota to be making more of their hydrogen, or 1,000 people to be making more hydrogen cars, corporations and big business listen to that, and I think we should never underestimate how important that direct consumer feedback is, and I'd definitely like to see more of that.
That's true, because most people are followers, in this world, and they need good leaders, and when they gravitate to someone that is doing the right thing, hopefully they'll want to do good themselves.
And that can be a click of the button if it's attached to effective policy.
Everyone wants to feel part of a tribe. They want to belong to something, and that's why we need to create as many amazing leaders in this revolution as we can, so that we can find these amazing people to look up to us and hopefully do the right thing.
And the power of social media, as we all know, there it is. Is that
the magical window.
Anyone can be a leader now. You see one person, sometimes I see a ton of hits on somebody's page, and then I go, well, who is this person? I realize they have 495 followers, but they said something that ignited the nation and the world, actually, and it goes viral, and you go, wow, look at the power each one of us have.
And the power also just within your family. If we all just focused on who is in our inner circle. I come from Mississippi. My whole family is, conservative, Republican, and it's hard to be able to convince them of certain issues, but the more that I just led by example, I've changed my parents' minds on a lot of issues.
Yes, exactly. It's like that can of bacon fat on the stove no longer exists in my household back in Texas.
My grandmother had the same thing. Oh yeah.
And isn't there a garden in your little hometown?
Yes, we just implemented it a couple of years ago. Went back to my junior high and an elementary school, and we created one of our Green My School program gardens there, which is great. And I mean, even in Mississippi, you would think we would know all about farming and being green, but no, we didn't care at all. We made fun of people that were in clubs, like that in high school. It just wasn't the cool thing to do. And now I feel that it's past the tipping tipping point now where especially the young generation, thinks it's cool to be a part of giving back, and especially when it comes to environment.
Well, you know, watching kids realizing that things actually grow out of the ground rather than, you know, getting them from the bins at your grocery store, or seeing that meat in red packages. If you realize it comes from an actual animal that you like to go to the petting zoo and pet, maybe you won't eat so much meat, if at all, anymore.
And you appreciate where it comes from, and it educates you about, you know, what you're putting in your body.
Yeah. So, okay, now I see a 6. Would anyone like to say anything in closing, just to go down the line?
One quick thing, that you asked a question earlier about how do we get beyond partisanship. And I remember this young kid, okay, he's 20-something, he's not a quick, but I was interviewing him, and he was talking about why he got into the environmental movement. And he said, you know, I'm from China, and when I was growing up, kids 20-something years old, we've never seen a true blue sky. We've never seen stars at night. I just woke me up. You've never seen stars at night, because the air was so bad. And for him and for the work that they were doing, this is about, fundamentally, can we play outside? When we have kids, can they play outside? And what's the point of all this money if we can't even go outdoors, right? And so for me, I don't want us to get to that level of pollution where we finally have a wake-up call. And arguably, many communities are already at that level. And so I hope that we can move beyond partisanship and really begin fundamentally fighting for the right for our kids to play outdoors.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well,
I think what's happening in our energy system as a whole, especially in America, we're going from this grid system to more of a distributed system. And I think as a whole, that's what needs to happen within the environmental movement. We need to be moving a little bit away from that dependency on like a big structure, a big federal system, a big six big power systems that are feeding into this, national ecosystem, and we need to be more focusing on the micro and the small projects that are really making a difference on the ground. The big projects are obviously making a difference on a big scale, but I think just focusing on connecting all of those dots. And like Mr. Jones said, I keep coming back to what he was saying. I really resonated with it. Like, we have to be moving away from these upper echelons that apparently have the control, because effectively we are in the engine room. This is where the impact and that distributive system that is supporting this upper echelon, I mean, this is where the real change and the real impact happens. And I'm just excited to be a part of collaborating. Competition is healthy and it's a part of what we're doing, but if we have any hope of pulling this around as quickly as we need it to happen, I mean, saying that we're going to be under 2 degrees from the Paris Agreement, and that's way too ambitious. We're not going to be close to getting under 2 degrees by 2070. We're looking at minimum 4 degrees by the end of this century if we're lucky. That's if like the best emission scenario out of the 4 that the Paris Treaty put together. And I think to really drive action and to drive that tangibility that we can see, I think it comes down to really just focusing on that distributive engine room that we're all a part of and we can all influence today, not tomorrow. We don't need to go through the bureaucracy and the loops and the signing of the blue document that goes here and then gets lost and put over here, and then like full out Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy Vogon stuff. It's like ridiculous, some of the loopholes we have to go through just to make basic change. And we're in that engine room where change is far more accessible, far more quick to implement. And I just want all of us on stage and everyone here just to feel hopeful about that and to share that good news instead of scrolling first thing in the morning and just seeing bad news, Donald Trump's hair, bad news, and actually just inject that goodness and that opportunity and that hopefulness, because without that, like you said, we're just going to go back to that fear and you're going to be in this vicious circle. So distributive community that I see in front of me, that makes me hopeful. And if we can make it more tangible what we're doing, I think that's also a big part of it. And just go outside. I mean, just being in the outdoors, we have blue skies here, which does make a difference, getting our families outdoors, going for hikes, going for swims, going to the beach. I mean, all of those things remind remind us that we are connected to something that is outside of boxes. So,
thank you.
Yeah, that's
Jill?
really great. That's wonderful. And I'd love to, take a little bit off of, we were talking about opportunity before, and we were talking about hope, and we were talking about love. And how do we combine both the hope and the love to really see where there's opportunities for us? And when you talk about this, kind of this whole ecosystem, this distributive kind of community, right? But it's also, it's more about how do we engage everybody who's involved with a social cause, with a problem, with the underlying problem that is so pressing, that is so intractable, that it needs really that entire community to come together, that systems change that we really want to bring about. When we look today, I think this afternoon we'll have the Innovation Challenge, and it'll be really interesting to see some of the ideas that many of our social environmental entrepreneurs are really thinking about, and how can we as a community help today and also tomorrow when they're pitching, really think about how do we bring everybody together with that mindset, with that opportunity focused of how do we enable them to really make a business and a change, an impact of what they want to achieve. So that's a little plug for the afternoon too as well.
Thank you.
Exactly what these guys said. But I think it's so easy to get discouraged and have that inkling to want to give up because the negativity is so much louder. Positivity, people, don't really listen to as much. So that's one thing that we just have to, get through together. It's great to be around like-minded people because in numbers we have strength. And but we continuously have to make sure that that message is positive because, once you go a little negative, people just shut off completely and they will not learn a thing.
Yeah, back to love and hate. The power of hate seems to be stronger because it's louder right now. But if we all rally behind love and feel the love, that is such a more powerful force. We all know that. So that's what we are, a love army. Yay, Van.
Army.
We're the love army.
And, I could wrap it up. Okay. Be sure, California people, how many people are citizens and registered California? If you're true progressives, please go to patharrisforsenate.com. We have put together a progressive voter guide to know who in your district are really behind you with all kinds of progressive ideas, including the environment. So
great. Write
that down, patharrisforsenate.com. In fact, Mr. Harris is sitting right here. He's watching us today. He's got my vote. Anyway, thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much.
So much.
Thanks, Francis.
Thank you, Francis.
Thank you.